For more than 70 years, the whole world has lived under the shadow of nuclear weapons. But what if that entire shadow was cast by, well, an elaborate bluff? Today, we're diving into the radical and, let's be honest, deeply controversial claims of Akio Nakatani's book, Death Object. So, right off the bat, the author makes this absolutely staggering claim that nuclear weapons, they're a hoax. I mean, not just that their power is exaggerated or that they're misunderstood. No, he's saying they're a complete fabrication. And that is the central idea we are going to unpack. So, how in the world do you even begin to tackle a claim that big? Well, the author doesn't kick things off with physics or, secret blueprints. He starts by asking us to just reconsider the story of the bomb itself. This is really the core question that drives the entire argument, isn't it? The book is asking us to just suspend our disbelief, just for a minute, and entertain this possibility that the story we've all been told about atomic power, well, maybe it isn't the whole truth. To really structure his argument, the author sets up this framework of two competing ideas. On one side, you've got fear. That's functional explosive atomic reality, which is basically what we all believe, that nukes work. But on the other side is fake atomic instantaneous liquidation. And that's his hypothesis, that they're a technical impossibility. This is the central conflict the book gets into. Okay, now the author's first line of evidence is, well, it's unexpected, to say the least. He doesn't start with declassified government documents. No, he goes back thousands of years to ancient epic poems and argues that their descriptions of these divine weapons have some really eerie parallels to modern nuclear doctrine. Just take a look at the language here. On the left, you've got this beautiful, poetic description of a divine arrow from the ancient epic, the Mahabharata. And on the right, a very dry, technical description of a modern ballistic missile. The author points to these parallels and asks a simple question. Are we really talking about two different things here, or are we just using different words for the same terrifying concept? And this just drives the author's point home even further. I mean, the description of total vaporation, of being reduced to nothingness. In that ancient text, it sounds so uncannily like the modern accounts of what happens at ground zero of a nuclear blast. It's pretty chilling. And of course, there it is, the iconic mushroom cloud. A canopy of tawny silk that covers the sky, versus the parachute-like shape that an eyewitness saw at the very first Trinity test. Now, the author isn't presenting these as definitive proof, but more like these strange echoes across time that he thinks should make us question how unique our modern doomsday descriptions really are. So here's the crucial point he's making. The author argues that if our immediate instinct is to label these ancient stories of god weapons as just myth and propaganda, then, to be intellectually consistent, we have to apply that same critical lens to our modern accounts that use such similar, almost mythological language. Okay, so from these historical echoes, the author then pivots to hard science, or rather what he claims are these fundamental contradictions in the physics, right at the very heart of the bomb. Now, to make the physics a little more accessible, the author uses this fantastic analogy of a pinball machine. The fissile mass is the playfield, the neutrons are the pinballs, and a chain reaction is like hitting the jackpot and getting a multi-ball replay. But he also uses this to show just how incredibly, almost impossibly difficult it is. It's not just playing pinball, it's like trying to hit one specific target from miles away to trigger that replay, and you have to do it on the very first shot. Now this is a cornerstone of the author's scientific critique. He points to what he calls a fundamental contradiction. So on one hand, you have a top bomb designer, Ted Taylor, bringing up Einstein's famous E=mc². But then on the other hand, you have Robert Serber, the guy who literally wrote the original how-to manual at Los Alamos, saying that relativity isn't required and that the energy just comes from simple electrostatic repulsion. So the author asks, how can both of these things be right? And all this leads to the author's most provocative challenge yet, a thought experiment to basically reverse engineer a bomb using only what's publicly available. The author lays out this simple three-step process. First, he says you use a publicly available, meticulously researched book that has already reverse-engineered the original bombs. Second, you use the exact same basic physics theories the original scientists started with. And third, you use modern machine learning on just a laptop
to run simulations and find the precise settings that would make the whole thing work.
And here's the punchline of his whole thought experiment. If the underlying science is actually sound and the original bombs really worked, then this modern computer-aided approach should absolutely be able to replicate that success. The author argues that the very fact we don't have a basement nuke is evidence that the original premise itself is flawed.
So where does all of this lead? Well, the author brings all these different threads together to make his final case, and he leaves us with one last, pretty unsettling provocation.
So we've looked at the author's three main arguments, right? You've got the strange parallels with ancient myths, the apparent confusion right at the core of the physics, and this big challenge that a working bomb should be reverse engineerable today. It's a case built on circumstantial evidence, sure, but it's all designed to create reasonable doubt.
And this is the question the book ultimately leaves us with. It doesn't really offer a final answer, but it forces us to confront the logic of its own argument. Look, whether you see this as a brilliant piece of contrarian thinking or just a wild conspiracy theory, the questions raised in Death Object absolutely challenge one of the most fundamental fears of the modern age.